All right, welcome back. I hope you're all having a great Christmas week. Today, we're continuing our RBT exam practice question series, where we're going through 10 RBT exam questions and breaking them down how I think you should think about them when you take your actual exam. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe if you are enjoying this content. For all of our study materials, please check out rbtexamreview.com. We offer 3 practice exams, a task list study guide. Our combo pack comes with everything. It's our best deal. And of course, we have our competency study guide as well. So check out all of those materials. Any questions or comments, please let me know. Email me, leave a comment below. I'm happy to help. Other than that, keep working hard, keep studying hard. Let's get to our questions. Question 1. Which of the following answer choices is not a responsibility of RBTs? So RBTs have a very clear duty when it comes to ABA service delivery. And it's important that RBTs like yourselves know the distinction between what is and isn't your responsibility, what you should and shouldn't be doing. So first and foremost, RBT responsibility is implementation. RBTs are always implementing, all right? RBTs are not designing, they're not performing assessments other than maybe preference assessments, and they're not parent training alone, okay? They're assisting in all these things, but their main goal is implementation. This question says, what is not? So when the question asks what is not, we're looking for the one answer choice that is wrong. 3 will be a responsibility, and then 1 won't. So let's find the one that won't. A, communicate properly with supervisors. Should RBTs communicate properly with supervisors? Absolutely. 100% a responsibility of RBTs. It's on our task list. RBTs should always communicate promptly with supervisors. What about B? Design behavior intervention plans. Do RBTs design plans? No, they might assist in designing plans. They might gather data to help with designing plans, but RBTs do not design plans on their own. B is not a responsibility of RBTs. B looks like our best answer. Always read all of the answer choices. You want to be sure. C, implement skill acquisition programs. This is the primary duty of the RBT. That is to implement programs. So C is absolutely a responsibility. And then D, record accurate and valid data. Is it the responsibility of RBTs to record accurate and valid data? Absolutely. We should be taking data on everything. So the only answer choice here that is not a responsibility of RBTs is to design behavior intervention plans. A plumber visits a house after receiving a call about a leaky faucet. When the plumber arrives, he asks the homeowner how often the faucet drips. The homeowner tells the plumber that the drip occurs about 20 times per hour. What dimension of measurement did the homeowner use? Okay, measurement question. Very easy, very straightforward. There's only one reason you might get a little confused. And why is that? The question asks, okay, how often? So when we think about how often, we're thinking of a count, how often something occurs. We're thinking frequency, right? Now, what dimension of measurement goes along with frequency? Rate. Rate and frequency, okay, they're tied together. Frequency is simply the count. Rate is going to be the count plus a time component. And that's the key differentiator here. We have the drip occurring 20 times, which is our frequency, but then we add a time component. We add that per hour component. So the drip occurs about 20 times per hour. What dimension did we use? Did we use frequency, duration, or IRT or rate? Well, we used rate, okay? That is, again, that's the key difference. Frequency is the count. Rate is the count plus a time component, which is what we used here. Duration, of course, is how long it lasted. We're not talking about how long the drip lasted. And then inter-response time would be how long in between each drip, which again, we're not looking at. We are looking at the rate of the drip, which is 20 times per hour. Your supervisor designs a skill acquisition plan targeting identifying fruit. You first teach your client the names of individual fruits and have them point to each fruit. You then lay all the pictures of different fruit on the table and have your client point to each card as you name each fruit. What are you working on with your client? All right, other than the obvious, which is identifying fruit, what specific skill are we working on? Which term are we looking for here? What are we doing, right? We have all of these different types of fruits on the table, and I say point to banana, the client points to banana. I say point to apple, the client points to apple. How does the client know what the difference is between the apple and the banana and the pear. What skill are we working on? Are we working on discrimination? Yes. Discrimination is the ability to tell the difference between two or more stimuli. In this case, we're telling the difference between fruit. In order to respond accurately to these SDs, they need to be able to discriminate between bananas, pears, grapes, apples, the different types of fruit. You are working on discrimination with your client. A looks like our best answer. Let's keep reading and try to understand why the wrong ones are wrong. B, differentiation. Differentiation is close to discrimination, except when we talk about differentiation, we're not talking about the stimuli, we're talking about the responses. If you're having your client point to all the fruits, you're using the same response. If you had your client point to one fruit, grab one fruit, and then swipe one fruit, that would be different responses. That would be differentiation. So again, discrimination is the different stimuli. Differentiation is different responses. What about C, maintenance? What is maintenance? It occurs after teaching and is to be sure that a skill is still there once we're done learning it or teaching it. We're still teaching this skill, so we're not working on maintenance quite yet. And then generalization. Generalization is engaging in the response outside of the teaching environment. Not what we're doing here. We're still at the same RBT in the same environment, teaching the same skill the same way. We're not generalizing yet. We are simply working on discriminating between different fruits. Which of the following answer choices is not always a requirement of differential reinforcement? Okay, so another kind of straightforward, almost definition question, but not quite, because it's a little tricky. Because remember, our differential reinforcements that we're looking at as RBTs are what? We have DRO, we have DRA, we have DRI. Now, in all of these, we're going to be using differential reinforcement. And what is differential reinforcement? It is reinforcing some behaviors and putting the other behavior on extinction. So on all types of differential reinforcement, we need what? Well, we need reinforcement and extinction. So A and B, we have to have for differential reinforcement. We're looking for the answer choice that is not always a requirement. So that leaves us with C and D, a target behavior and a replacement behavior. Do we always need a target behavior? Well, sure, we need to know what we're going to put on extinction, right? And potentially what we're going to reinforce. In terms of DRO, okay, we are reinforcing when the target behavior is not occurring. When the target behavior does occur, we put it on extinction, right? Therefore, do we always need a replacement behavior? No. Why is that? DRO does not teach a replacement behavior. DRA and DRI do. However, if we're using DRO, we're not teaching a replacement behavior. We're still reinforcing, we're still putting something on extinction, we still have a target behavior with DRO, we just don't have a replacement. Therefore, of the following answer choices, replacement behaviors are not always a requirement of differential reinforcement. Make sure you understand this question. It's a little tricky. Make sure you break it down a few times until you really grasp why D is our correct answer. Gregory is a 16-year-old male with a developmental delay in general education class. Gregory is well behaved, but he has trouble making friends. He tells his parents that he doesn't know how to start a conversation with others. What skill might be most appropriate to target with Gregory? This is a little more obscure question. It's not just a straight term definition question. It requires you to think a little bit. On the task list, they have an item that says RBTs assist with assessments. Assessments include social skills assessments, academic assessments, life skills assessments, etc. So as an RBT, you need to start thinking about these different types of skills you're going to teach and when they apply. Remember, we want socially valid skills, skills that have meaning, that make meaningful change in the lives of our clients and their families, and that affect them day to day, right? They're important skills. In this case, Gregory has trouble making friends. He's okay, he's well behaved, he does fine in school, he's in a gen ed class, he just can't make friends. What might be most appropriate to target with Gregory if we want him to make more friends? Would it be A, self-help skills, B, functional communication skills, C, the ability to drive, and D, gross motor skills? Well, C, the ability to drive is certainly useful for an adult. However, is the ability to drive going to immediately help Gregory make friends, or more specifically, start a conversation with others? No. The ability to drive might be useful once he starts making friends. However, right now, it's not going to be the most important skill. Same with gross motor skills. Gross motor skills are also important. However, gross motor skills are not going to assist in starting conversations. What about self-help skills? Again, 16-year-olds should engage in self-help skills like cleaning themselves, dressing themselves. But what are we looking at here? We need Gregory to learn to make friends and to start conversations. To do that, we need functional communication skills. B, functional communication skills is the most relevant skill to teach, relevant to our goals. We have to think about our goals at that time. Gregory, at this time, wants to make friends. He needs to start more conversations with others. Above all else, functional communication skills could help us achieve this goal. Your client's parents receive a call that a family member passed away. They now must make a sudden trip across the country for the funeral. They tell you that they are having problems finding a babysitter, so you volunteer to stay with the client since you've worked with them for almost 2 years. Is this acceptable? All right. As RBTs grow with their families and stay with the same family for long periods of time, there's a certain relationship and bond that develop. Okay. In this case, you've been with them 2 years. They trust you, you trust them. So you offer to babysit. Is that okay? Well, think about our task list. What does our task list say? Our task list says we need to maintain boundaries between professional and personal relationships. In other words, no dual relationships. Babysitting this client off the clock with no parents home certainly would violate that principle. So when it says, is this acceptable? We kind of know what answer we're looking for. Okay, so let's try to find that answer. We predicted our answer choice. Let's see if we're right. A, no, you must first ask your supervisor for permission. Well, even if you ask your supervisor, I would hope they would tell you no, because ethically, they are in charge of you and they need to be sure you're following your ethics code. Even if you ask permission, you should not be babysitting for your clients. B, yes, you're allowed to babysit since you're not clocked in as an RBT. Again, no, as long as you're a part of the client's team and working with them directly as an RBT, you are in a professional relationship with them, you cannot babysit. If you are no longer an RBT on their team, then the rules change. C, no, this is crossing the line from professional to personal. Yes, this is what we predicted, right? We are now entering into a dual relationship where we're babysitting and not just delivering services. We are crossing a line from a professional relationship to a personal relationship. C looks like our best answer. D, yes, it is an emergency. It might be an emergency, but unfortunately, that does not change the fact that you cannot have these dual relationships. What is one defining characteristic of interval recording? Think about everything you know about interval recording. What do we know about interval recording? It involves a set length of time. It's discontinuous. We have whole intervals. We have partial intervals. We are looking at target behaviors. So we have all these things in our mind that could be one of our defining characteristics of interval recording. Let's try to find one of those characteristics. A, every instance of behavior is measured. What did we just say about interval recording? It's discontinuous, meaning what? Meaning not every instance of behavior will be measured. Therefore, A is not going to be a defining characteristic. B, measurements used include frequency and IRT. What type of measurements are frequency and IRT? These are continuous measurements. Interval recording, again, is a discontinuous measurement. B is not going to be a defining characteristic of interval recording. C, the times between the SD and the behavior is measured. What are we describing here? If we're measuring the time between the SD and the behavior, we are measuring latency. Is latency part of interval recording? No, latency is continuous measurement, so it's not going to be interval recording. That leaves us with D. Time spent measuring behavior is broken up into specific periods of time. Okay. What do we do with interval recording? We pick out 20 or 30 minutes maybe, and we break it up into time slots. 5-minute intervals, 2-minute intervals, 1-minute interval. But regardless, One defining characteristic of interval recording is D. Time spent measuring behavior is broken up into specific periods of time. Apologize for that truck in the background. So you could have answered this question a few different ways. Hopefully, when the question was asked, you started thinking about everything you know about interval recording. You could have eliminated A, B, and C, or you could have just read through it and spotted D as a defining characteristic of interval recording. A student in your class will cry when given a math exam. In response, you give them a 5-minute break from the test. Refusing to give the student a break when they start to cry would be considered what? All right, be careful here. We're looking at our answer choices. It's obviously a punishment, reinforcement, or extinction question. If your student cries when given a math exam and you give them a 5-minute break from the test, what can we assume? We can assume this 5-minute break is reinforcing because your student, every time they get a math exam, they start to cry. In response, you give them a 5-minute break. Today, you said, I will not give them a break. I'm going to refuse to give that break when they start to cry. What would that be considered? Are you adding or taking away anything, or are you simply withholding something from them? Well, we're not adding or taking anything away, right? You gave the math exam, the student started to cry, and then nothing changed. You just refused to give them a break. So you are withholding reinforcement from a previously reinforced behavior, which is extinction. So it can be difficult to identify the difference sometimes between punishment and extinction in the beginning. Extinction is not a punishment procedure. Remember, both work to reduce behaviors, but punishment, we're adding or taking away something. Extinction, we're simply not delivering reinforcement. In this case, the student starts to cry. You don't give reinforcement, nothing else changes. You're putting it on extinction. A client's mom informs you and your supervisor that the client responds best to timers rather than engaging in specific responses. What type of reinforcement schedule might be best to use? First glance, this might seem like a tricky question. You might say, well, I don't have enough information, but you do. What do we know about this client? Client responds best to timers rather than engaging in specific responses. What do we know about our basic reinforcement schedules? Well, ratio schedules are based on responses. Interval schedules are based on timers. Simply knowing that, we can eliminate all ratio schedules, right? If we want to use timers and not specific responses, then we're going to try to stay away from ratio schedules. So we're looking for some sort of interval schedule answer here. So A, ratio schedule, well, we said we could eliminate that, right? Ratio schedules can be eliminated. What about B, intermittent schedules? Okay, that's better. You can use intermittent schedules because interval schedules are a type of intermittent schedule. So B is better than A, but do we have a better answer than B? C, continuous schedule. What is a continuous schedule? That's a continuous reinforcement or an FR1. Continuous schedules are also ratio schedules, so we're trying to avoid those. B is still our best answer. Let's look at D, interval schedule. Yes, intermittent schedules can be ratios or intervals. We're looking for the best answer. The best, most specific answer is D, interval schedule. We want to use some sort of timed schedule. Therefore, interval schedules is going to be what we use. Again, intermittent schedules is okay because interval schedules can be intermittent, but intermittent can also include ratio. We want the best, most specific answer, which would be D, interval schedules. How soon should you start fading prompts? All right, you should know this. Why do we fade prompts? We fade prompts to avoid prompt dependency, to transfer stimulus control. It's a very, very crucial part of any service delivery system. If we're not fading prompts, we're doing a giant disservice to our clients. As they get older and they get more accustomed to the prompts, and as teaching goes longer and longer, they become prompt dependent. It becomes a really difficult scenario. So let's look again for our best answer. How soon should you start fading prompts? A, whenever the client asks. Not necessarily, right? Just because the client doesn't want the prompt anymore doesn't mean they don't need it, right? They might want to be independent, but they still might need it. That is to you and your supervisor's discretion. B, as soon as possible. Yes, this is the answer. We fade prompts as soon as possible. We want those prompts removed whenever we can, right? B looks like our best answer. Let's keep reading. C, you should never fade prompts. Completely false. We should fade them as quickly as we can. And then D, as the client gets older. Be careful with this answer, okay? As the client gets older can be relative because some clients develop at different rates, different speeds. And just because the client is older doesn't mean they excuse me. Just because the client is older, that does not mean they don't require the prompts, okay? So you can't just assume they're older, they need less prompting. The best answer here is how soon should you start fading prompts is B, as soon as possible. All right, I hope you enjoy. Hope you have a great Christmas. I'll be back Friday and Saturday with some BCBA questions. Be sure to check those out. As always, like and subscribe if you did enjoy. All of my study materials can be found at rbtexamreview.com. Be sure to check those out. Questions or comments, email me. I'm happy to help. Other than that, work hard, study hard. See you soon.